Hello and welcome to this video about an introduction to fractions. We will be starting a unit over fractions, so I just want to cover some of the basics so that way we understand what we're working with here. Because a lot of people do struggle with doing operations with fractions or to compare fractions, to relate fractions to decimals or percentages, and it's something that you're going to need to be able to do. So we're going to go over this and hopefully lay the groundwork for a solid foundation with fractions. So let's start off with the core idea with fractions. And that's sort of essentially the definition of what a fraction is. And so fractions are a ratio, something we'll talk a lot more about soon, of the part of something or the parts, parts, and we'll put the S in parentheses because it might be a part, to whole. And that's all a fraction is. So when we write something like 1 over 2, what we're saying is that we've taken something and we've broken up into two parts. And so this is how many are in the whole. So how many in the whole. And then this right here would be the part. And so if we have 1/2, it looks like that right there. We have 1 over 2. Let's now use a new fraction. Let's say we have something like 4 over 5. So again, this is how many there are in the whole, and then this is the part of it, or how many parts. And so if we draw same sort of thing, let's use rectangles for this. Oftentimes we'll use circles, but circles are hard to draw freehand. And it's going to be broken up into 5 equal parts. Now, I'm doing this freehand, so I might be a little bit off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And then we have 4 parts of it, so we'll shade 4 of them. Like that. And so that's 4/5. Now, I really just want to stress that all a fraction is, it's a ratio of the parts to the whole. And so there, hopefully those images are kind of helping you process what a fraction is. Now we'll talk about the vocab. There are a few words that we need to be familiar with. The first one is numerator. The numerator simply is the top number with an R, there you go. The other term we need is denominator. And that's going to be the bottom number. And these terms come into play as we start to talk about how to perform operations with fractions. So let's look at a fraction. Let's say we have 3/8. So 3/8 is going to be equal to, 3/8 is not equal to anything, or it is equal to 3/8, but the point I want to make here is that the numerator is 3 and the denominator is 8. And as we maybe do something with like 1/4, where 1 is our numerator, so 1's the numerator, 4 is the denominator, we have to understand, when do we change numerators? When do we change denominators? How do we change them? And will they change? Kind of a thing. So when we talk about adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing fractions, being familiar with the terminology of numerator and denominator is key. And then the final term I want to talk about here is equivalent fractions. Now the word equivalent essentially means the same. And so that's the idea with equivalent fractions. It is, same value, but different numbers. Same value, but different numbers. So, for example, let's take a look at something like 1/2 and 3/4. Oh, not 3/4, 2/4. 1/2 and 2/4. So we were to draw it up in rectangles, do the whole hold apart. 1/2 would look like this. 2/4, I don't know why I keep saying 3/4. 2/4 would look like that. essentially they have the same value. They're both covering the same amount of ground on that rectangle, but they have different numbers. And so again, when we work with fractions, we need to be able to get equivalent fractions. So we need to be able to say, hey, I have 1/2, but maybe I want it to say 7/14. Has the same value, different numbers. And this might work for other fractions as well. So it might be something like I have 2/3, but I need to change that to maybe 8/12. There might be a reason for it. Or, at the same time, we need to make sure that we have simplified fractions. Simplified fractions. And so what that means is instead of going this way, we're going to go to the right, or to the left, where we're going to take big numbers and make small numbers. And so a simplified fraction is fractions, or fractions where the GCF of the numerator, which I'll abbreviate with n, and denominator is 1. And so if the GCF of the numerator and denominator is 1, means you cannot reduce it. So let's kind of crack open 8/12. Well, if we look at those two numbers and we ask ourselves what is the GCF of 8/12, we're going to find that it has a GCF of 4. What that means is that we can take out a 4. And so if I do 8 divided by 4, I'm left with a 2. And if I do 12 divided by 4, I'm left with a 3. And so that's how 8/12 becomes 2/3. And now I take a look at it. GCF of 2 and 3, well, those are both prime numbers. So there's nothing they share in common. So all I can say is 1. Now I know I have a simplified fraction. Now, you won't always be dealing with prime numbers. So, for example, you could have the fraction 4/15. 4 and 15 are not prime numbers, but if you still look at the GCF of 4 and of 15, it's going to be 1. And so that's how you know that you have a totally simplified fraction. So hopefully this introduction has been sort of good for you, is helping to lay down a good foundation for how we're going to deal with fractions, because we're going to build off of this knowledge as we look into dealing with operations with fractions and then eventually comparing fractions. So good luck with your homework or practice, and let me know if you have any questions.